Can begin, yeah? Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all of you here today. This is our third lecture by Dr. Talin Suciyan. So usually I start by introducing her, but I think this is the time when I can say she doesn't need any more introduction. And today we're going to hear her third lecture on the topic of her research. If you remember, those of you who were here, she spoke in the first one about Serpui Tekyan. Serpui Tekyan and her communication, her letters that she was writing from Istanbul to Philadelphia. The second lecture was dedicated to the postcards sent from the Armenian orphanage in Greece. And the third lecture, today's lecture, is going to be dedicated to letters written from the Ottoman provinces, the regions inhabited by the Armenians, to Philadelphia. And the talk is entitled as Kept with Care, Letters from Purgatory. It's lovely to see so many of you here today, and we're going to continue with these events. In next week we don't have an event, but the week after that we're going to have Bedros Matosyan, who's going to speak about the denialism in today's world, denialism of the Armenian genocide. So that will be in 2 weeks' time, and we will send out all the invitations with all the details. And finally, today we have the mayor of Kerman with us today, Maria Pacheco. So thank you very much for joining us and attending this lecture. So without any further ado, I want to give the floor to Dr. Talin Suciyan. Please welcome her, and I'm sure it's going to be great today as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David, for the introduction, and thank you all for coming here. The weather is nice. You could have done something else on a Friday evening, so thanks a lot for coming here. And on Zoom, there are friends and families who made this evening possible, actually. Shamlian and Pogarian families. Susan Jolie is there, and I'll introduce you them in my talk. But first of all, thank you very much for everybody for being tonight here. This is a presentation that doesn't have a prior published work, so this is going to be presented for the first time, the material, and the presentation itself, all the pictures and the letters that you'll be seeing are for the first time, for the first time meeting with the audience. So today's presentation, entitled Kept with Care, Letters from Purgatory, concerns a series of letters written between 1913 and 1915 from Arapgir to Philadelphia. The letters involve correspondence between Kevork Shamlian and his younger brother Mardiros, and Kevork and his 19-year-old son Arakel. Both Mardiros and Arakel had migrated to Philadelphia due to the untenable conditions for young men in the Ottoman Empire. These letters reveal many things: the conditions of Armenians in the provinces of the empire, the anxiety of a father who feels he must send his son away for his own safety, the hopes that things will improve for all, and the fears that they will not. Sorry. Before we examine excerpts from the letters and reveal the Shamlian story, let me tell you a little bit about this project, how it came to be, and how it has progressed. This study has been made possible by a group of people led by Susan Shamlian Pogarian and her family, who have closely guarded these precious letters. Here is a picture of Maritza Shamlian, who passed away in 2018. She is the daughter of Arakel Shamlian, the aunt of Susan, and the original keeper of the letters. As the eldest child of an Armenian family from the Ottoman Empire, she recognized the value in preserving this family history. The team working on these letters includes Susan, granddaughter of Arakel Shamlian, Susan Arpagian Jolie, who co-authored a book with her brother on her family in the context of Armenian genocide, and also organized an exhibit entitled The Armenian Genocide, One Family Story. And John Paulson, who holds his family documents from Istanbul and Hajin, which we have partly read and translated. All three are from Philadelphia area, where the Shamlians settled. As you can see, the common thread that brought us together was our commitment to family archives. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to, yeah. Okay. We started working on Shamlian family history over a year ago. Susan Pogarian digitized the letters, and we began meeting weekly to read them one by one, of which there were 70 pages of 36 letters. John transcribed the handwriting, and Susan writes down the English translation of these letters from her great-grandfather. As of now, every letter has been digitized, and almost half of them are transcribed and translated. Such an orderly and methodical working group is a researcher's dream. We have been holding our weekly meetings, reading sessions for almost a year and a half, and we are determined to continue our work. So today's talk owes a great deal to the Shamlian family in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, who have entrusted us with their valuable archives. This is a work in progress, but we have more than enough material to present tonight, and I hope to remain true to the world that the letters have introduced us to. As I mentioned earlier, today's lecture will introduce letters from 1913 to 1915 from Kevork Shamlian, mainly to his son Arakel. It is from Kevork that we learn so much about the close relationships between Armenian families in the provinces, about the sophisticated levels of literacy of Armenians, and about the hardships that foreshadow the disaster to come. Kevork is the head of a large family, and his letters illuminate his fatherly devotion and his deep faith in God. Most likely, sensing the catastrophe to come, he nevertheless continually reassures Arakel, as well as his own brother Mardiros, that those left behind in the Ottoman lands are fine. Okay, now we have to This poignant reassurance becomes a theme throughout the letters. To introduce this theme, we will look at the first letter we read. At this point, this is the first letter we read. The one, actually we only had one in Ottoman script. So this is Turkish in Ottoman script, Perso-Arabic script. And this is the part where Kevork Shamlian ends. And actually you can even see Mergogmen Hankistierek. You see? So don't you worry, be assured we're fine. And this is here is the date, 1917. That is 1333. Okay, at this point, we knew very little of Shamlian's story. Ironically, this letter is mostly written by a relative of Kevork Shamlian, Mardiros Gıçikyan. But this is where we first hear Kevork's voice. The date on this letter is November 1917. It is in Turkish and as required by the authorities. Written to Shamlian and Gıçikyan relatives in Philadelphia, the letter is unwavering in its reassurance that everyone in Arapgir is fine, that their only problem is missing their beloved relatives who are in Philadelphia. Kevork Shamlian adds a brief postscript himself to this letter, where he writes, Mergormen hankistierek, be assured that we are all fine. We now know, however, in 1915 and after 1915, nothing could be fine. Yet this phrase recurs in Kevork Shamlian's letters from Arapgir to Philadelphia, as it must have recurred in hundreds of letters from provinces to those who were forced to leave to find work. It's emblematic of familial love and devotion, and also of the fear of what is to come, as well as the hope that what is feared does not materialize. But now let's go back to the letters of 1913 and examine what they reveal us about the conditions of Armenians in the Ottoman provinces. So let's go to Arapgir and see where Arapgir is. It's around here. Today we know Arapgir as a district of the province of Malatya, but in the late Ottoman period, it was the center of a township with the province, within the province of Mameratul Aziz near Harput. And here you can see even perhaps better. Here is Arapgir. Yeah, and Harput is here. Arapgir alone had 2 townships and 67 villages. The 1914 Ottoman census put the total population of Arapgir, including its villages, at around 35,000, of which there are more than 24,000 Muslims, more than 9,000 Armenians, more than 600 Protestants, and 220 Armenian Catholics, and 1 Greek. So it's very exact. The category of Protestant was used for Protestant Armenians, and therefore it could be said that the Armenian population of Arapgir was more than 10,000 at the time. According to the Armenian Patriarchate census, Arapgir had 9 churches and 15 schools in 1914. I will read extracts from the letters, both in original and in translation, to show the level of literacy of both Kevork and his son Arakel. Especially the letter, Arakel Shamlian, who was only 19 years old when he was sent to Philadelphia, and both his handwriting and the sophisticated language he uses are amazing. Okay. And these are pictures from Arapgir. Arapgir had an artisanal population, and textile production was an important source of income. Silk, cotton, and cloth weaving were followed by jewelry, shoemaking, and coppersmithing. Some of the professions listed in the annual trade journal Annuaire Oriental for the year 1914 states that 1 of the 2 lawyers, 3 of the 4 bakers, 3 of the 4 grain merchants, 4 of the 5 grocers, 1 of the 2 booksellers, 22 of the 23 weavers, 19 of the 26 dry good dealers, 1 of the 4 representatives of large commercial companies in town, 1 of the 2 restaurateurs, 7 of the 8 soap makers, 2 of the 3 glass makers, 3 insurance agents, 2 bankers, 2 brokers, 8 shoemakers, 8 companies engaged in cotton weaving, 4 leathersmiths were Armenians. Here we can see the strong influence of Armenians in the economic and cultural life of Arapgir. And this is from Varsen Oruncaklı, last remaining Arapgirtsi. It was published in Istanbul, Bir Zamanlar Publishing in 2011. In the early summer of 1913, in the midst of the Balkan Wars, young Arakel Shamlian, rode off on horseback to say goodbye to his family and his birthplace, Arapgir. He did not know that he would never see his family or his birthplace again. He had with him two precious gifts, a divan or daybed cover woven by his father Kevork, and a pair of socks knit by his sisters Zabel and Zarui. Arakel was to carry these pieces all along the way to Constantinople, from Constantinople to Patras in Greece, and from Greece to Philadelphia. So here is his journey from Arapgir first to Istanbul, and from Istanbul to Patras to take the ocean liner, and then from Patras to Ellis Island. And we are talking about a 19-year-old, right? It took him longer than planned because he couldn't board the ship from Patras immediately. He was detained supposedly due to an eye infection, but in reality the ship was full and Arakel had to wait another ship before he could continue his journey. With minimal communication, not receiving word that their son was safe with his uncle, his family back in Arapgir was distraught. According to Ellis Island's records, Arakel finally arrived in the USA by the Martha Washington ocean liner on July 23, 1913. The same register testifies that Arakel was born 15th of November 1893 in Arapgir, making him only 19 when he made this journey. Here it is. Until Kevork Shamlian, Arakel's father, received the good news that Arakel had arrived safely in Philadelphia, he had been haunted by nightmares. He compared his relief at Arakel's safe arrival to a woman giving birth to a child. In August 1913, he vividly expressed his anxiety and fears as follows, and I quote, «Kիշեր եւ ցերեկ երազից մեջ կդեսնեմ, որ մերդան մեկ կողմը այրած էր։ Գսեմ ես հիմա քոսեի, փան չի գար, երբ այս կեսը վարեցավ։ Անշուշտ ասիգա թշնամիի կորձ է, արթնցա եւ ահա ոչինչ կա։ Վերջաբես, այս եւ ասոր նման երազներ զիս կդխրեցնեին։ Գսեմ գամ եղբոր գամ Արաքելի փամը բադած է, սակայն օրտնյալ է ասված, մութը լույսնող ասված կա, ծեր նամակները մեզ հանգստացուց։ End of quote. Night and day, in my dreams, one part of the house was burned. This is enemy's work, of course. Then I would wake up and there's nothing. Finally, these nightmares ended. I was thinking something must have happened either to my brother or to my son Arakel. Yet, blessed is the God who turns darkness into light. Your letters have comforted us, by all means. End of quote. Truthfully, there were many reasons for Kevork Shamlian's anxiety at home in Arapgir. In a September 1913 letter, Kevork informs his brother Mardiros in Philadelphia about the peace treaty at the end of Balkan Wars. Conscription into the military had been one of the fears as many of the Armenians who were conscripted never returned. Shamlian wrote about how dire the economic situation was, especially because of the war. He refers to it by saying, and I quote, "Had we not had military, things could have been better." End of quote. Meaning, most probably, they had to feed the Turkish army as was expected from Armenians during the times of war. On the other hand, the abusive and oppressive taxation was extracting everything Armenians had. Therefore, poverty in the provinces on the verge of the First World War was forcing more and more Armenians from the provinces to make a long and risky journey from the Ottoman Empire to the unknown continent of America. Kevork Shamlian would write to both his brother Mardiros and his son Arakel in the same letter. Paper and the cost of mail were precious, so Kevork would first address his brother and then Arakel, and he expected the same from them too. In his letter from August 1913, he complained that Mardiros did not write anything, and the letter was only signed by Arakel. This was enough to cause Kevork much stress. He asked them to write together so that he could be assured that everything was fine over there. And I quote, Այս անգամ հուլիս 28 թիվ նամակ մարինք, որ միայն առաքելն կրած էր։ Քեթ մի ըստորակրություննիդ անգամ չէի կրած, որն մեզ մտահոգություն պատճառեց։ Խնդրեմ ասկե վերջ ամեն նամակի մեջ ծեր երկտողն, մեզ մխիթարեցեք։ End of quote. We received a letter that only Arakel wrote. You didn't even sign your name. It made us anxious that you didn't put your name. Please, after this, in every letter, write 2 lines to console us. Kevork Shamlian, in his letter from September 1913 from Arapgir addressed to his son, despite his own anxiety, worry, and turmoil, finished his letter assuring Arakel that they were doing fine. Մեր գողմեն հանգիստ եղիր, աշխատե եւ Աստծո հաջողությամբ ամեն դժվարությանց պիտի կարենաս խախտել, գդրիչ եղիր, բնավ բան հոգ չնես, Աստված կա, ամեն բան կա, հայրդ Kevork Shamlian. Don't worry about us, we are fine. God willing, you will overcome every obstacle. Be brave, don't worry, there is God, there is everything. Your father, Kevork Shamlian. It was actually Kevork who had to take care of the larger family instead of his becoming a bantucht or a migrant worker. His younger brother Mardiros was sent to the US because being young was an important criterion to finding work. As if this was not bad enough, Kevork's son Arakel, who was 12 years younger than his uncle Mardiros, left the family too for the same reason. Kevork Shamlian expressed his sadness to Mardiros regarding this situation and stressed the importance of regularly receiving letters from him and Arakel. And I quote, Իրոք շատ երկար եղավ ծեր գրածը, թուք բանտղտության մեջ, իսկ ես այս դժոխային խորին։ Ինչևից է, գհուսանք թե հարաչիգա կարնան, փոքր իշադե, քաղաքականությունը գշտկվի, և թուք մոդադենեն երգիր գվերաթարնակ։ Եվ ծեր ու մեր պապակները լիովին կգադարվի, երբեք մտքես չեք ելներ, և ես չեմ ուզեր ցեզ առանց նամակի թողու, սակայն չեմ գիտեր ինչ է որ այսպես ադեն գվարանիմ մեր նամակի կրությանց մեջ։ Արաքելն անշուշտ ցեզ խոսած է, երբ հոս եղած ադեն, ցեզնե նամակ կփերեր, կփանայի երկու գարտալուս աչքերս կլեցվեր, և իրեն գուդայի, որ գարտար։ Այժմ այնչափ չեմ, միայն գուզեմ, որ ամեն փոշտային նամակ կարտամ։ Ինչպես որ դուք գուզեք, նույնպես ալ ես։ Գիտեք Արաքել, թե փոշտան երթալ եւ նամակ չառնել որչափ ծանր գլա։ Մանավանդ ասկևերջն, որ օրերն բաղ են, թաղեն մարդ չունին փոշտային կնացող։ Մենք պիտի երթանք այնտեղ, ծրդուն թեմ կանգնել եւ նամակ չառնել, քիչ ծանր գլա մեզ։ End of quote. It's been a long time that you've been carrying this burden of being a migrant worker and longing for home. And I, on the other hand, am captive in this well of hell. I'm hoping that next spring the politics would improve and you can return to your homeland and all our wishes will be fulfilled. I don't want to leave you without letters, but I have difficulty writing them. Arakel, when he was here, brought your letters from the post office. My eyes were full of tears. I couldn't read them. Arakel used to read them. Now I'm not so emotional. Now I want to read every letter. Just as you like to receive them, I do too. As Arakel knows, to go to the post office and not receive a letter feels very heavy, especially since the days are cold. There is nobody in the town. No one checks the mail delivery. We are going there and waiting against the cold. Please write every week so that we get a letter to console ourselves. End of quote. As you may remember from my first lecture concerning the letters of Surpik Tekyan from Istanbul to Philadelphia, in this case too, letters were not only a source of happiness, but also a way to connect to those who were left behind. Kevork Shamlian described himself as being in the well of hell. However, those left behind were still in purgatory. Hell had not broken out yet. It was foreshadowed. Nonetheless, it was impossible for those in the midst of the crisis to actually envision the cataclysm to come. Finally, we understand that matters escalate as Kevork Shamlian, in the letter of August 1913, thanked to the Philadelphians for the money they sent back, which the family in Arapgir had been waiting for. A very unexpected, short but striking sentence was the key. He stated there had been famine. Առաջին փոստային նամակ ցկած եւ խրգացնիտ 4 հատ, մինակ 4 հատ, անգլիական ոսկինոց չեկերնիտ մեզ ժամանելն դեղեկացրած եմ։ Հուսամք հարաճ քանզայս ըստացած կլակ գրգին եւ գրգին շնորհակալիքս կհայտնեմ։ Որչափ որ նեղորերալ անցուցինք այս սովիդարիներուն, նորեն իմին հույսս գդրած չեմ գդրած։ End of quote. In the first letter we received only 4 British pound via check. I already informed you about receiving your check. Again and again, I express my gratitude. We have had very difficult times in the years of famine, but I'm not without hope. End of quote. From the 1870s onwards, famine was repeatedly reported from the Ottoman provinces. While recent research has put the emphasis on climate change as the reason for famines, abusive and oppressive taxation, along with constant warfare and the expectation that Armenian peasants and villagers would feed the Ottoman army, were among the major economic causes of famine. Moving to 1915, we have 3 letters at hand. The first letter is from January, in which Kevork Shamlian wishes his brother and son a happy and healthy new year. Սիրելիք իմ, մեր գենաց օրերու վրա դարիմը եւս փարթեցինք, թեվագողելով նոր թվականը 1915 տարին։ Ուստի շնորհավորելով ցեզ այս նոր դարին, հեգնիցս որբեսի նոր դարին ըլլա արդյունաբեր, խաղաղավետ։ Շնորհեմ ես դիեզերած, առողջ եւ երջանիկ կյանք, ցեր ու մեր ամենուն կորձերուն բարի հաջողություն եւ բանթուղթներուն բարի վերաթարց արժանացնե։ End of quote. My dears, we have added another year to our lives. As I congratulate to the new year, I ask the Lord for productivity and peace. May God grant us all a happy and healthy life. I wish us success in all our endeavors. May God make us worthy to see migrant workers return home. End of quote. The second letter at hand, written in May 1915, Kevork Shamlian first mentioned that their family and neighbors are all healthy and well. After these remarks, he added that Avedis, who was a family member, was drafted into the military. Avedisը երկու օր առաջ զորք ճամփեցինք, դերը բարի վերաթարց պարգև է։ We sent Avedis to the front. May God bring home safely. Avedis never returned home. Well, first this one, I guess. Yeah. We know from Kevork Shamlian's letters that there were other Armenian families from Arapgir in Philadelphia. These include the Shamlian relatives, the Kuchikians and Tatikians, who corresponded with their families in Arapgir. In the absence of the family letters, Kevork Shamlian was able to receive news from America via these relatives in Arapgir. In fact, in the last letter from Kevork Shamlian, we have a short paragraph from Khaso Tatigian, and this is the part, and this was the slide yet to come exactly, writing to her son in Philadelphia, assuring him that she is well and she is in good health, but that she desperately misses him. Only in this letter and the one in Turkish, sent in November 1917, we encounter direct handwriting of others in the letters sent from Arapgir, implying how preoccupied they were. Here you have the original and the translation. Although the majority of the letters were read, majority of the letters we read were written from Kevork to Arakel, we found one letter from the spring 1915 written by Arakel to his father Kevork. Unfortunately, this letter was returned to Arakel in Philadelphia. This is also from, okay, this is the returned one, yeah. Գարոդալի հայրիմ, 915 ապրիլ 6 թվագիր բադվական քրությունից ժամանակին ըստացած եւ բարունագության վերահաս, որ մեծ էր գենաց քաչարողջության լուրը առնելով չափազանց ուրախացանք։ Մաղթեմ կփարցիարն աստուծմե, որ սույն ուրախությունից մշտադևն է ու միմյանց ցանկալի տեսության արժանացնե։ My longed for father, I received your precious letter on time, and when I read its contents, we were extremely happy to hear that you are in good health. Let's hope from Almighty God that our happiness will continue, and may God make us worthy to see each other again. Yeah, this is Arakel writing to his father from Philadelphia, and he's here 21 years old. This is his handwriting and his words. And this was in June 1915, exactly. So Arakel spoke of a letter sent from Arapgir on April 6. However, we don't have this letter in our collection. Based on Arakel's response, Kevork must have reported some of the first steps of genocide. Nevertheless, Arakel expressed his extreme happiness that his father was alive and well. We don't have any letters between Arakel's letter of June 1915 and the letter I'm about to present, the one I spoke about the beginning of my talk, written in November 1917 in Ottoman script and written clearly under close scrutiny and censorship. This is the envelope of the returned letter, and it is so interesting. You see here you have Kevork Shamlian, Arapgir, Turkey in Asia. This is how it goes from America, I guess, and then here you have Medzabadiv, Shamlian, Kevork Aga, Arapgir, Surp, Kevork Tal. So clearly it comes until probably until Istanbul or Arapgir with this part, and then it needs also this part. Yeah. Here we go. And I'm going to read the translation of this whole letter. It's all about sending greetings of various people. To my son, Artin and Arakel Ağa, with my special greetings, I hope you're doing fine. If you ask us, until the date of this letter, we are all safe and sound, and we greet you specially. We were very happy to receive a number of letters from you, which we read longingly. Your mother and brother Minas Ağa and your daughter are healthy. They are sending their greetings. Your brother-in-law, Hacı Kevork Ağa, is healthy, and they send their greetings. So are Şirinoğlu Ağa. We are asked to write our letters in Turkish by the government, and therefore we are writing in Turkish. If you ask how we are doing, we are all fine. We earn a good living. The only problem we have is missing you. May God make us worthy to see each other with worldly eyes. Please greet us, my cousins, Nazaret Ayciyan, Mardiros, Ohannes Ağas. Here, your uncle Ohannes Ağa and all his family members are fine. They are sending their greetings. All your neighbors here, both young and old, they are fine and sending their greetings. We hope that all of you there are doing well. November 9th, 1917. Mardiros, Gıçikyan. This letter shows that Gıçikyan and Shamlian families managed to survive, and many of the family members were alive by November 1917. In their first sentences, they made clear, if you ask us, until the date of this letter, we are all safe and sound, and we greet you specially. Bizlerden sual eder iseniz tarihi mektuba değin vücudu acizanemiz sıhhatte olup mahsusan selam ederiz. We can assume that all the names mentioned in the letter were survivors, and those who were not mentioned in this letter as being healthy and greeting them in Philadelphia were not anymore alive. However, it is still unclear how they managed to live 2 more years after the summer of 1915. What we know about the killings and the deportations from Arapgir is that by mid-June and early July 1915, the Armenians of Arapgir were already being arrested, drowned in the Euphrates, and sent to the death marches. Yet, we do know that there were some Armenians who remained in the town to provide the Muslim population with the necessities of life on temporary permits. Further, the textile company needed weavers, and thus the fact that Shamlians were weavers might have allowed them to survive by working in that company for an additional 2 years. We don't know exactly when, where, and how members of Shamlian, Gıçikyan, and Tatikyan families lost their lives. We do know that this letter, which they were forced to write in Turkish, they wrote the names of the survivors and sent their greetings, stressing how much they missed those in Philadelphia. By November 1917, Gıçikyan and Shamlian families must have witnessed the deportations and death of fellow Armenians in the region, heard horrible stories from all sides. They too were on the verge of death, but they did not forget to assure their beloved ones in America that they were all doing fine. Despite the fact that there is considerable research on the Armenian genocide, as it is in this case, after 112 years, we are still at a loss to find out the truth and the answer simple questions about our own families. The Shamlian family has always assumed Kevork and others died in 1915. This research is proving otherwise, but also posing new questions. Most of us also have no idea of the specific fate of our lost ancestors. Harry Harutyunyan, in his extraordinary memoir, The Armenian Genocide, Unspoken as Heritage, speaks of the helplessness of not knowing his grandmother's name. Knowing one's grandmother's names should be considered a birthright, and yet the simplest knowledge has been taken away from many of us. Genocides not only annihilate populations, but more than that, they annihilate the very basic knowledge about ourselves, so that we keep on searching for generation after generation. Walter Benjamin, one of the most prolific Jewish intellectuals of 20th century Germany, reminds us that time is not simply empty, it has a quality. Times of danger, in particular, contain a deeper knowledge, a deeper truth about the situation one is going through. The survivors were the bearers of this truth. We, as their heirs, are still trying to get closer to that truth. And we should continue our efforts because this is the only way to continue the legacy of survivors and victims alike, so that we can all say, don't you worry, be assured that your memories are safe. Thank you. Well, I'm sorry, I have still some pictures to show. I'm sorry. And this is, I think, the best part, the nicest part of this probably little, how shall I say, difficult story. And this picture that you see is taken for this presentation, for tonight's presentation by Shamlian family in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey. And here we have a family tree of Shamlian family that we've been working with in order to identify who is who. And here we have this part that we have been working with, that you have been hearing about, Arakel, Kevork Shamlian, Maritza Gıçikyan. And this is Arakel in Philadelphia. And this is Mardiros in Philadelphia, Mardiros Shamlian, the brother of Kevork. And this is the family, and they are holding this by Arakel's father, Kevork's woven the divan cover, at least 112-year-old. 3 generations of Shamlian family. Okay, thank you.
Now we have time for some questions. It was, to be honest, very interesting when you were talking about Kevork Shamlian, and then we see the name George Shamlian at the top.
Yeah.
See? So that's kind of the family member, I guess.
Yeah. Shamlian family is on Zoom. Susan is there, with whom we are reading, and her father, Kevork Shamlian, George Shamlian, also is in Zoom, and some others from the working group, I guess. Susan, Jolie also, and I can't see you all. I'm sorry.
Questions, please. And I'll check the chat if they have any questions in the chat.
When these letters went back and forth, do you think the authorities actually read them, or hidden messages, or maybe destroyed some of them?
The way the letters are written is so clearly deciphered that, I mean, you have to decipher the letters. I mean, they are ciphered. So you have to see what to understand when you're reading. So basically, the censorship was so internalized by the authors, by the writers of the letters, so that actually there was no need for censorship. But in that letter, the last one, from 1917, it was clearly stated that we are writing in Turkish because now it is required to do so. But even in the letters before, each time when we were reading this, don't worry about us, leruk miyamid, etc., we were thinking, I mean, there was nothing good in the situation, and they kept on saying that everything was fine. So whenever you read that everything is fine, you have to think the opposite, basically. Well, first Mardiros came, and afterwards Arakel, and Susan Susan Shamlian Pogarian is from that family. So both of them, I think, Arakel arrived in 1913, and Mardiros came some years before him. I don't remember exact day, but the reason why the Bantuk Tutyun, you know the term, right? The migrant worker, the phenomenon of migrant workers. This was already in 1850s an issue, but it wasn't a migrant. Migrant workers were not going until U.S. at that time, but it was okay in 1900. Susan, the great team. So migrant workers started to come to U.S. probably by the end of but it's by the end of the 19th century, and by beginning of the 20th, it continued, and during the Balkan Wars, it was a real trouble for families to send their children to the army, which most of the time they never returned. So we can assume that during the periods of war, sending male children, well, female are not sent anyway, but the sons to elsewhere to work was more common, and there was an economic crisis, definitely.
We have right now from Shamlian family alive.
They are here in Zoom. The family members are here. I mean, we have some of them, and then new generations.
The comment in one of the letters where it said Aspat Luisane,
Mutlu Savore, something like that.
When first time I went to Ellis Island, when you go through the rooms and the handwritten letters, there's notes. There was one note from an Armenian woman who literally said the same thing. We finally see the light through God. So that just reminded me of that, how many families went through Ellis Island just like he did.
Of course.
That time.
Yeah. Rahmetli.
In the 1950s and the 60s, when the Jerusalem Patriarchate needed kids to raise them as seminarians, once every 3-4 years, they would send a priest to the interior of Turkey to recruit. And it's very interesting that only poor parents would let go of their children. And there were kids from Arki, from Sasun, whatever interior city you can think of, with some Armenian remnants.
Yes,
So we know there were Armenians still there in the 50s and 60s.
definitely.
The question is, are there any now?
Very little. But during those years, I mean, we have to count around 20,000 and more Armenians remaining in the provinces after 1922, 23. I mean, the numbers can go higher, but not less, definitely not. So there were some tens of thousands of Armenians in the provinces after 1922, 23. And they continued to come to Istanbul or to go towards Aleppo during 1950s, but more, I mean, it continued all throughout the 20th century, basically, to evacuate the provinces completely. But now there are, of course, still some. 2 years ago, the region of earthquake, Malatya and Hatay and all those regions, there were again Armenians who were hit, and so that we heard again Armenian families living in that region. So there are some regions in which we have some, very little, of course, number of Armenians living, and of course, Islamicized ones that we don't know how many they are.
Can I ask you one question? Because it came out, so this is the second time. So the first time we had Sotpuhi Tekyan, a woman writing a letter, writing in beautiful handwriting, and also the vocabulary was great, which means she was well educated. And here as well, we have a woman writing a letter, and you mentioned the schools that we have there. Do we have any information about the level of education among women at the time?
Among women, of course. I mean, I think literacy is another question because we understand that at the beginning of 20th century, there was not an issue of illiteracy. Looking at these letters, I don't see any illiterate Armenian in that sense. I mean, either they are writing in Turkish or in this, krapar loaded Armenian, as you saw. But okay, Kevork Shamlian he had the education to become a priest. Then he never became because he had to work, to earn the money for the whole family. But Arakel learned how to become a tailor, and still he was writing the way he was writing in 1915 to his father. We read his letters. So it shows that at the beginning of 20th century, they had, or they were home educated, homeschooled, or they were learning, krapar, and also how to write beautifully. These are almost paleographic writing styles that they're having. So, I mean, beginning of 20th century, I think the education. I mean, you saw how many schools there were. There were 15.
Were they co-educational? This is the
Well, girls were also educated, definitely, because I don't know how many, whether the percentages are the same or not, but in the presence of Protestant American missionary schools, etc., where they were also serving girls and boys alike, it must have been difficult to make inaccessible education accessible for girls.
The level, or what were they being educated on? Was this Karapar, or is this Western Armenian?
It is Western Armenian with some influences of Krapar, yes.
Okay.
And there was an expression, kan and z, which is very Krapar style construction, having kan and then the z with the direct object. Yes, please.
Yeah, beautiful story and a period of tragedy. You said you went through quite a few letters. Are there any that didn't make it for the presentation you'd like to talk about?
Additional. For this presentation, no, because it's already, I'm overexcited because this is the first time that I'm presenting these letters, and I think, well, what I can say is there are always lines. In each letter there is one line that you have to be extremely alert to realize what is being said, like the one in the famine. And there is an issue of, when it comes to approaches to 1915, there is an issue about the military. And you feel that there is something going on, you don't understand what exactly. And then they are using some terminology, some words, some Turkish words of that time that we don't know anymore. So there are these kind of difficulties that you have to consider. And they are writing in a way that Mardiros and Arakel understands, and we today, we can't, we don't have the context. So we have to make, you know, further research each time in order to understand those very short lines that are perhaps giving some very important clue about the period. Do we have any questions in the chat? Because we have...
I didn't see anything,
Okay,
so
okay.
yeah. Okay,
So-
I guess we can thank our speaker once again.
Thank you.
And now we have some refreshments, some nice sweets, some kata, and some other delicious stuff that Barlo has kindly provided. So please help yourself, and we can continue. Oh yeah, sorry. Before we go, you can also buy the books, and there are some discounts, if I'm not mistaken, that the publisher has sent. So you can buy some of the books at a discounted price. So please help yourself.